I still don't know why I filmed that day. Nothing was happening, that's the thing. It was just a slow, ordinary afternoon, the kind you forget by the time you get back to the hotel. And yet I had my phone out, recording the guard for no reason at all. Maybe some part of me knew. I don't believe in that sort of thing, usually. But I've watched that clip 100 times now, and I still can't explain what made me press record 30 seconds before it all began. Let me tell you what I saw, all of it, exactly how it happened. It was late summer in Halewick. If you've never been, the old palace sits right at the edge of the city, where the shops thin out and the road opens into that long stone square. The kings of Brewin have lived there for 300 years. Tourists come for the guards, those still, silent men in the tall bearskin hats and the gray coats, standing in their little sentry boxes like statues someone forgot to bring inside. I'd come alone. My marriage had ended that spring, and I'd booked the trip mostly to have somewhere to be. I remember the heat that day. It was heavier than you'd expect for that part of the world. The kind of warmth that makes the crowd move slow and lazy, everyone squinting, half of them holding ice creams that were already melting down their wrists. There was a busker somewhere behind me playing a violin badly, a group of schoolchildren in matching yellow caps, an old man feeding pigeons even though a sign clearly said not to. The usual. And then there was the guard. He couldn't have been more than 25, young face, fixed jaw. He stood at the corner post, closest to the low iron railing where tourists press in to take photos. People were doing what people always do, leaning near him, pulling silly faces, waving hands in front of him to see if he'd flinch. He never did, not once. He just stared straight ahead at a point somewhere past all of us, like we didn't exist at all. I remember thinking how strange that job must be. To stand there for hours, so close to 1,000 strangers and let none of them touch you. To be a person and a statue at the same time. That's when I noticed the little girl. She was small, maybe 6, 7. A red dress, scuffed white shoes, and hair that had come loose from whatever her mother had tied it in that morning. She was standing near the railing, right in front of the guard, staring up at him the way children do with total open honesty. No fear, just wonder. She lifted her hand and gave him a tiny wave. He didn't move, of course, but I swear, and I've slowed the footage down to check, I swear the corner of his mouth twitched. Just barely, like something in him wanted to smile and the training wouldn't let it out. The girl laughed, delighted. She waved again. It was a nice little moment, the sort of thing you'd forget in an hour. And then the crowd shifted. I don't know how else to describe it. You know how a flock of birds all turn at once before you even see the reason? It was like that. A ripple. People near the far edge of the square started stepping back, and the murmur of the crowd changed pitch, went sharper, thinner. A woman's voice said something I couldn't hear. Then another said it louder. I looked up from my phone. There was a man coming through the crowd. He wasn't walking normally. That was the first thing my brain caught, even before I understood why. He was moving too fast and too straight, cutting through people instead of around them, and they were peeling away from him like water. He wore a heavy dark coat, far too warm for the weather. His head was down. His hands were in his pockets. And he was heading for the railing. For the little girl. I want to be honest with you about what I did in that moment because I think about it a lot. I did nothing. I froze. I stood there with my phone up, still recording, my mouth half open, and some slow, useless part of my mind kept insisting that this was probably nothing, that I was overreacting, that people don't just. Then his hand came out of his pocket, and there was a knife in it. I heard someone scream. I think it might have been me. The sound went through the whole square like a crack of glass. The crowd broke apart. People grabbed their children, turned, ran, tripped over each other. The old man's pigeons burst into the air all at once. In half a second, the whole calm afternoon just came apart at the seams. But the little girl didn't move. That's the part that still wakes me up sometimes. She didn't understand. She was too young. She just stood there at the railing, holding on with both little hands, looking around at all the running grown-ups with this confused expression, like she'd missed the start of a game everyone else was playing. And the man was almost on her. 6 feet away, 5. He raised the knife. Now I need you to understand something about that guard, about what they're trained to do and, more importantly, what they're trained not to do. They don't leave their post. That's the whole thing. That's the entire point of them. They stand. They endure. People have fainted in front of them, spat at them, screamed insults an inch from their faces, and they do not break. The whole tradition is built on a man who will not move no matter what. I'd spent an hour watching this guard prove exactly that. He hadn't so much as blinked for a child waving right in front of him. So when it happened, I couldn't process it. He moved. He moved fast, faster than anything that size should move, that heavy coat and boots and the ridiculous tall hat and all. In one single motion he came off his post, and I heard his boots hit the stone, and the rifle he carried came around, and he was between them. He put himself between the man and the girl. I don't think the attacker expected it. I don't think anyone expected it. There's footage from 3 different angles now, and in every one of them you can see the same thing. The man actually stumbles, actually hesitates, because the thing that was supposed to be a statue just turned into a wall of gray and steel right in front of him. The knife came down anyway. The guard took it on his forearm, the arm he'd thrown up to shield his face and the child behind him. I saw the blade catch. I saw him flinch. But he didn't fall back. He drove forward instead, right into the man, using his whole body and the length of the rifle to shove him away from the railing, away from her, back into the open square. They went down together. It was not clean. It was not like a film. It was 2 men wrestling on hot stone, the knife between them, both of them grunting, the guard's hat knocked off and rolling away across the ground. His hair was dark and damp with sweat. There was blood on the gray sleeve, spreading. And still he had one arm flung back behind himself, holding the little girl in place, keeping his own body between her and the blade the entire time. I remember her face. She'd finally understood. She was screaming now that high, thin sound a child makes, and she was reaching for him, for the guard, not away from him, toward him. Some instinct told her he was the safe thing. Then the other guards came. I hadn't even thought about the others, but they were there in seconds, pouring out from the palace side, and 2 of them hit the man at once and pinned him, and someone kicked the knife spinning across the stones, and just like that it was over. It couldn't have been more than 15 seconds from start to finish. It felt like an hour. The man was face down, held, shouting something none of us could make sense of. And the guard, our guard, I'd already started thinking of him that way, pushed himself up onto his knees. His sleeve was dark and wet. His hand was shaking. But the first thing he did, before anyone had even reached him, before he checked his own arm, the first thing he did was turn around and look at the girl. He looked at her the way you'd look at your own child. "Are you hurt?" he said, his voice cracked on it, first words I'd heard him say all day. "Are you hurt, sweetheart?" She shook her head. She was crying too hard to speak. And then this young man in his ruined coat, bleeding on the stones of a palace square, with 100 phones pointed at him. He did the thing that undid me completely. He smiled at her. Same tiny smile he'd almost let out an hour before when she waved. Only this time he let it come, gentle, exhausted, just for her. "Good," he said. "Good, you're all right now." Her mother reached them then. I hadn't even seen where she'd come from, a woman with her whole face torn open with terror. And she snatched the girl up into her arms and just held her and sobbed. And then she looked at the guard, still kneeling there, and she couldn't get a single word out. She just reached down and put her hand on the side of his face, the way you'd touch someone you loved, this stranger, and he closed his eyes for a second. Nobody clapped, I remember that too. In films people clap. Nobody did, it was too real for that. The whole square just went quiet and heavy, hundreds of us standing there in the heat, and a lot of grown adults were crying and not bothering to hide it. They got him up. 2 of the other guards took his weight under his arms. His legs weren't working properly. As they walked him back toward the palace gate, he kept turning his head, looking back over his shoulder at the little girl, checking again and again like he needed to be sure she was still safe. She watched him go the whole way. She lifted her hand. And she gave him one last little wave. He couldn't wave back. His arm was wrong now, but he nodded at her just once. And then the gates took him and he was gone. I stayed in that square a long time after. I couldn't make my legs move. People drifted around me in a daze, strangers hugging strangers, everyone repeating the same few sentences over and over the way you do when your mind is trying to make something make sense. I heard bits of it later, the way you always do, that the man had a history, that he wasn't well, that he'd stopped his medication, that the little girl in the red dress had just been the nearest thing to reach. It might all be true. I don't really know. I don't think it changes anything. I found out the guard's name a few days after when the story spread. I won't tell it to you because I don't think he'd want me to. From everything I read, he never gave a single interview. When they asked him, when they wanted to put him on the news and call him a hero, he apparently said only one thing. He said he was sorry that he'd left his post. That's what he was worried about, not the knife, not his arm, which took a lot of stitches. He was worried he'd broken the one rule those men live by, that he'd failed the tradition by stepping off that stone. And I keep coming back to that, because I think he got it exactly backwards, and I think he's the only one who couldn't see it. The rule was never really about standing still. He stood there for 300 years' worth of ceremony and duty, silent and unmoving, so that people would trust that when it mattered, when it truly mattered, someone in a gray coat would be there. Standing still was the promise. Moving was keeping it. He didn't break the tradition that day. He was the reason it exists. I've been home a long while now. My life put itself back together, more or less. But I think about that afternoon more than I think about almost anything else that's ever happened to me. I think about how close it came. 15 seconds. One young man's decision made faster than thought. And I think about the little girl in the red dress, who wasn't afraid, who ran toward the danger because some deep part of her already knew where safety was standing. People ask me sometimes why I still have the video and never posted it. The truth is I don't want it to be a clip. I don't want it turned into something you scroll past. I want it to stay what it was. Because somewhere out there is a man who thinks he did something wrong that day. And I hope wherever he is, someone has told him the truth. He didn't leave his post. He just finally showed us what the post was for.